Start now. There are 45 online. I have not uploaded yet the previous video because this morning I was very busy. I was in charge with the webinar. No,
Oh, it's
I
okay. You
believe you
can
received
add it
also the
with
link.
this
I do not know
video.
if you have attended our webinar this morning. Most probably tomorrow I'm going to upload it and you can actually see. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, another thing is what is that? Next week, most probably we're going to start with a new schedule. No, I was speaking about this a while ago. So it will be 1:30 to 3, but wait for further announcement. I think Miss Karin will send you the schedule, the schedule, because the dean just called me today.
Yes, we received the schedule.
You received the schedule already.
Yes, we
That
received
it
the
will be
timetable.
it will be 1:30 to 3, right?
Again?
It will be 1:30 to 3.
1 second, let me check again.
Because the dean just called me today.
No, it
That's
is
great.
still the same.
Huh?
It is still the same. 2:30 to 4.
Yeah, exactly. The dean just called me that it will be 1:30 to 3. I believe everybody will be okay with that, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe they will consult you, but for now, the dean just called me to confirm, no? So I'm just actually giving you, let the dean announce it, let Karin announce it. But
Doctor, it's from 2:30 to 4.
no, from 1:30 to 3.
Oh, okay.
I believe that will be next week. It will be announced. Don't worry.
Inshallah.
Okay. What else about the quiz? I'm going to give you a schedule of the quiz later on in the coverage. Don't worry, it will be very easy. All right. So, any question about that? Because I think there will be one or two quizzes. It depends on the outcome of your first quiz. But I'm always giving two quizzes just in case there will be people who will be absent on the first quiz, or your scores would be low. I'm not expecting that it would be
If you
low.
can add less portion in the quiz to get
Yeah, maybe
high
one or
mark.
two topics only. So I think that will be okay.
Again?
That can be arranged. Yeah, one or two topics only
One
for
or
the
two,
quiz.
yes. Okay, great.
And that will be good. I really would like you to pass from the beginning, no?
Thank
So
you.
that means to say you can be motivated to go on. Yeah.
You're
So I
most
really do
welcome.
not want to crucify you or to make you suffer. This is already pandemic, though we have to make adjustments. And instead of assignment, maybe I'm going to give you a group experiment. I'm still thinking on what to do. It depends on what will be the outcome of this pandemic. No, by next week, most probably I can decide on that.
I have an idea.
Yeah, what is your idea?
Why don't you give everyone full mark in the assignment?
That is not allowed. Yeah, okay. So at least
Okay.
I'm going to allow you to do things, no? To at least to submit something. I do not want also for you to copy, that's not a good thing. It will be irresponsible of me, no? And I'm not going to do that. Let me think about it. I believe it will be done by everyone. So hopefully I can give you by next week. And I was saying a while ago I was not able to upload the video last meeting because this morning I was supposed to upload, but I was very busy. So I will upload it later on. It will be shared. No, okay. If you would like to see some of the videos that I am actually giving, especially in my psychology class in nursing, also, you can you can go to the link, not to the website, to the YouTube, my YouTube channel, and then you can actually see also. Anyway, so let's move forward. Last meeting, I was discussing about the different branches of psychology where psychologists actually are going to work, where they are working, no? So basically different areas. I discussed about forensic psychologists, clinical psychologists, even psychiatrists, But everybody must know that the two would actually have a big difference, clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. But among other psychologists, the qualifications would be similar, except when you're going to compare that with psychiatrists who are trained medical doctors. They have MBBS or they have MD. Then eventually they specialize in psychiatry. And also, I would like to emphasize that psychology and psychiatry are two main different things, because in psychology, we're actually looking on the whole facets of human behavior. That means to say normal and at the same time abnormalities. So along that line, we're going to view holistically the person, while psychiatrists would actually look differently. They are only going to be focused on abnormal behavior, on mental disorder, on mental illness. After all, they are medical doctors, so they can treat. So the question is, sir, will the psychologist become a psychiatrist? No, they will never be. Not unless the psychologist will become a medical doctor. That will be it. So the psychology will become a preparatory medical course for them, just like in American degree, where you need a preparatory course before you are allowed to take Doctor of Medicine. But a psychologist can never become a psychiatrist. They have two different orientation. They are looking into abnormal behaviors, but only that the psychiatrist will look into abnormal behavior and treat. But for psychologists, we are looking into the holistic nature of human being. That is abnormal and at the same time, the normal facets of life. So basically, it's just like that. And I also give you about cognitive psychologists, school psychologists also. School psychologists are working in schools where they are in charge with the modification of behavior. Students are misbehaving, or they may be also looking into the treatment of ADHD, among others, no? While educational psychologists are in charge, or they are looking into how would students actually easily learn. See? So they are in charge with designing materials that would actually be helpful to the students. In short, they will engineer the educational process, how students would actually best educated and best learned, you know? Like for instance, they address the needs of dyslexic, those who have difficulty of learning, all right? Now, they are different from cognitive psychologists, okay? Because cognitive psychologists are studying or looking into how an individual acquire, utilize, and at the same time, the holistic aspects of it, information, okay? So how an individual think. So that's one area that they are actually looking into. I discussed also about evolution, about industrial psychology or organizational psychology. Industrial psychology or organizational psychology are psychologists who are engaged in conducting or maintaining the normalcy of behaviors in big industries of workers. Most of the time, they are employed as human resource, let's say in the human resource department. They would be in charge in testing prospective employee. Then after that, training employees, and later on firing employee, just in case they would not actually be at par with the requirements of an industry. Now, there is a complementary psychologist, which we call them as ergonomists, no? Ergonomics. This is an area of psychology where the psychologists would actually work so that they would, or teamwork, so that they would actually provide an equipment for the industry that would be easily used by human beings. That means to say, any equipment that will actually be designed will be acted upon or will be helped designed by an ergonomist. Easy usability, that's the key word. And we have also some sort of one area of psychology that studies the connection between mind and a biological aspect. We call them as neurobiology, neurology, or biological psychology. These are all interchangeable terms, no? That we can actually note of, right? So, all right, I think I start there. We have biological psychology or neurology or neuroscientist or neuroscience, or we have also biological psychology or psychological biology. Yeah, these are all interchangeable terms that we can use in psychology. Now, to continue our discussion, we have what we call as evolutionary psychology. No, you know, if we are going to analyze our behavior, there are ancient behavior that is being displayed right now. These are all necessary because these are all meant to provide us safety, at the same time to provide us comfort. Like for instance, all the things that would ensure that an individual would be safe will always be retained. You learn in evolution that a thing that is not actually going to be used will be eliminated. You come to think about the work of Charles Darwin also. You came to think about the work of other evolutionary biologists and evolutionary psychologists. They opine that some parts of the body, if not used, would be eliminated. One very basic example that we have is the appendix. Appendix, if you're going to come to think of it, appendix as of now, that could be located on the lower abdomen, right portion, it has no use. It does not even secrete an enzyme. But before that, since it was not used, it was little by little disappearing. No, even though if you're going to remove that, nothing will actually happen to you. It will not affect you. If it will be infected, of course, something will happen. We call that as appendicitis. Now, if there will be appendicitis, you need to remove that. It's a product of evolution. Another very important aspect that we know of is how we keep ourselves to safety at the, when it's already dark. Why do we need to sleep? Sleep is necessary. Retreating at night is necessary. Come to think of it, in the ancient time, our ancestors would only survive when they hunt. They would hunt when there is light. But of course, at night, there is no light. They will be hunted. So we call them as prey. In the morning, we call them as predators because they hunt anything. They hunt animals for food, no? But at night, the predators become the prey. So that means at night they will be hunted. What would they do? Since there is no light, they would actually retreat into caves. So at caves, they have nothing to do. They could not do anything, isn't it? They would not do anything. The fire was not invented yet. So what would they do? They would stay there until such time that it would be daylight again. So what would they do? They would sleep. That is the evolution of the sleep. So that when they will awake, it will be daytime, there is sun, so they will hunt again. That's the usual cycle, you see, until such time that this became a habit. This was transferred from one generation to another. We were able to accept that. We were able to incorporate that with our life. That's why in the afternoon, your parents would be looking for you anymore. They would be looking for you already. You know why? Because they associate dark with predators. They associate dark with danger. You see? So you should be at home before it gets dark. At night time, you need to sleep so that the following day, you will again do your thing. This is one of the evolutionary cycle that evolutionary psychologists studied and analyzed. No? So evolutionary psychology is very important. We have to look into our ancient behavior that could be transferred from one generation to another until such time that it stayed today, right? So therefore, an evolutionary psychologist would try to explain the behavior in terms of natural selection. You know, this is actually the byword and the byproduct of the work of Charles Darwin, because Charles Darwin once wrote a very, very beautiful book, good book, no? On means of natural selection by means of, this is actually, he formulated the so-called the survival of the fittest, no? Right? So he was the one who actually mentioned about natural selection, wherein the most fit will survive. Those unfit will be eliminated. So he was able to write a very beautiful book, no? All right? I believe you studied him. We were able to actually come across his work. All right? So that is actually the meaning. No, all the behaviors that could actually be beneficial to mankind would be retained. And at the same time, if you're going to look at that, this leads to success in our survival. There are so many behaviors that we acquired. No, if you're going to look on the behavior of your parents, normally, you see, we acquired from our ancestors the behavior to protect our children. See, that is the human behavior, right? So what forces us to that lead to selection for human language or abilities also. During ancient time, no, there were no means to communicate. What would they do? Our ancestors invented language. Yeah, for all you know, our ancestors would speak like dogs or cats. Somehow they were able to understand one another until such time that we were able to develop phonics. So things like that. The language is a product of evolutionary cycle. Therefore, it could be studied by evolutionary psychologists. How language was developed from the ancient time, among others, right? So that's very interesting aspect of psychology that we should know. Another one, this is actually very important, is the so-called social psychology. What does social psychology do? They do a lot, and they make a lot of money also. No, a social psychologist study how an individual will influence and is influenced by other people. We're being influenced by other people. Our behavior is actually influenced by other people. Come to think of it, if you're going to watch a commercial in television, the television says, buy me, because they portray that a product is something to be desired at, so they are already trying to manipulate our thinking. Manipulation and influencing of our thinking is the byproduct of social psychologists. These are the people who are actually studying how everyone influence one another. You have influenced another person, and other person is actually influencing you. This is actually very important, no? So they operate on this question. How do demands and expectation of authority figures influence our behavior? How strong is the human tendency to conform? So before you know it, we are actually having this ability to live in a society, in a group. Therefore, our behavior must be in conformity with the society where we live in. We tend to conform. Now the problem is, really, you see, how do we intend to conform? Are we conformists or are we not? Yeah. So are we being influenced by society or are we influencing the society? And a lot of social psychologists are also working in marketing, the display, the choices of light, the choices of color or the product that they are actually producing would always be the work of social psychologists. We influence them. We influence one another in a certain way or certain aspect. That's the work of social psychology. All right? Okay. Now, let's try to proceed with a new perspective, with a new side, with the new psychology that's developed. We call that as cross-cultural psychology. Now, what is actually the meaning of this? When you are going to stay in one area, you see, you can actually see that every culture has an influence. Like in the case of Dubai, like in the case of United Arab Emirates, we are very lucky because we are living here. You will be surprised that every culture would actually influence one culture. Now, the thing is, how can a culture be at peace with another culture? So something like that. So there is a phenomenon to be studied. So a new psychology was actually developed because of that. Like for instance, an Arab woman would go to Thailand, for instance, Phuket, no? You know for a fact that Thailand is well known because of their beaches. What would an Arab woman do in Phuket? You have to adapt, isn't it? When you go to the beach. In similar way, those people who like to go to beaches, when they go to United Arab Emirates, they would have to adapt. That actually is the meaning of cross-cultural psychology. How each culture will influence another culture. How we are living in a specific culture. Like me, I'm a Filipino. I have a culture that's different from yours. Why is it that I can take with you? Why is it that I can live with you peacefully? So this is actually a very important thing, no? A cross-cultural psychologist will compare the behavior of people from different cultures. That's why we should actually respect one another when we are going to stay in one country. United Arab Emirates, for instance, the university, for instance, as I mentioned to you at the earlier time of our meeting, that was 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that we are very lucky here because we are exposed to different culture. We have the ability to understand the culture of other people because we co-live, we co-mingle, we co-associate with each other. Okay? Right. So, like for instance, how does culture affect taste preferences? All right. Which culture places more emphasis on group interest and how does that affect our behavior? I'll give you an example. When I came to the United Arab Emirates, you see, I'm a Filipino. I was exposed to different culture. For instance, we separate our dish from our rice. So in short, when we eat, there is a clean rice and there is a separate dish. Yeah, the biryani was unknown to me. No, when I came here and I actually pursue the foods, no, I saw biryani. Why is it that this is mixed with, the chicken is mixed with rice? So it's something else. Then of course I was intrigued. I learned how to eat it, and I learned how to live with it. It's very nice also, no? You cannot actually see biryani in the Philippines because it's different. You will see different aspect, no? When I taught in Malaysia, in similar way, we eat only with our hands inside our house. But you will be surprised that in the restaurant, a classy restaurant, you will see some of the locals in that country eating by their hand. You will be surprised, no? And of course, I learned how to respect that because in my country, if you're going to eat with your bare hand in front of other people, that is a disrespect. So, come to think of it, no? In cross-cultural psychology, we're trying to learn how one culture influences one another, how we can adjust with one another, how our preferences are actually varying or are affected by one culture or the other culture. So we're being influenced, no? Like for instance, there is what we call as the concept of globalization now. And there is also the influence of Western media. We are being affected by that, and our cultures are being changed. The culture of social media, our cultures, whether we like it or not, are being changed. You see, are being influenced by them. No, other people would try to keep, but slowly we try to change that. They try to change that. Before, Muslim women were not allowed to school. But you are able to find out right now, especially in the United Arab Emirates, most of the students in universities are women. Why? Because our culture have been evolving. We are being influenced by the other culture also. As a result, we are improving. As a result, we are developing and we are progressing. Other than becoming closed, we are becoming open. That's how cross-cultural psychology is actually it's very important, no? And it's very interesting. There are so many psychology branches of psychology that's actually coming out, just like what I mentioned to you earlier. Also, there is what we call as the psychology of LGBT. There is another psychology that is actually becoming popular right now, the positive psychology, positive thinking. Along that line, everything is actually branching out. There is another psychology that's actually very important. Also, that's existential psychology, studying of the meaning of life. There is also another psychology that's coming out, no? That's studying a human experience and at the same time, human suffering. You see? So many things are actually coming as we experience new things in this new age. Now, moving forward, let us try to look into the early era and the roots of psychology. As I mentioned to you earlier, psychology actually basically came from philosophy. Then we gradually evolved until such time that a separate science was established. Because we cannot just actually confine in the world of possibilities. Psychology deals with the study of wisdom, they study everything. But in psychology, we branch out. We try to separate from that because philosophy always stays in the word of, let's say, possibilities, while in psychology, we stay more basically on the science of behavior that is more exact. Possibility is not exact, while understanding behavior is more exact. So it becomes a science. While philosophy does not become a science because it's very impossible, no, to study philosophy in such a way that we will be utilizing scientific method. But in psychology, since we utilize scientific method, it becomes a science. Now, in all cultures and throughout history, people have wondered about the nature of human thought. What is the this is actually the first thing that philosophy studied, human thought. What is its nature? Is it tangible? Can it be seen? Can it be touched? Our actions, and of course, our human experiences. How come single individual is different from the rest? So we have differences in terms of experiences. We have differences in terms of human thoughts. We have differences in terms of human action. Yet, these all three can actually be seen and can actually be empirically studied. The great writers of every civilization, you know, are widely read because they provide us with compelling descriptions. Starting with Aristotle, the triumvirate philosophers, no, Plato and Socrates, no? Compelling descriptions and make profound observations of human behavior. See? So they started to write something describing human behaviors, right? So that's actually the beauty of it until such time that psychology evolved into science. Now, we have the first people who really influenced a great lot on psychology. In the first era of psychology, we have William Bont. William Bont in 1879, actually before 1879, psychology was not still a science. Yeah, it belongs to the realm of philosophy, no? But in 1879, we are trying to stabilize and establish the science of psychology, beginning from the work of William Bont. Who is William Bont? He is not even a psychologist. Sigmund Freud, who is actually attributed the contribution of so much immense knowledge in psychology, is not even also a psychologist. See, most of the contribution in psychology are not psychologists even. They are coming from somewhere else. Like in the case of William Bont. William Bont is a physician. He is a medical doctor who researched on the working of senses. Yeah, he was interested on how our senses are actually working and functioning. And he established the first psychology laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. That was in 1879. This is a very crucial period in psychology when we try to study, put in a box, so that we can observe human behavior. But of course, the first thing that we studied would not be the human behavior, would be, of course, animals. Now, so right now, if we're actually come to think of it, the proper term of studying the behavior of animals comparing to human beings would be comparative psychology. That would actually start psychology, no? When we compare the behavior of animals to the behavior of man, like what we are doing right now in medicine, in philosophy, in psychology, or in anatomy and physiology, there is what we call as comparative anatomy and comparative physiology, because we are comparing the physiology or anatomy of animals to man. This was actually the concept of William Bont, comparing the psychology, particularly the study of senses, not of animals, then to man. Now, although other psychology experiments had been done, this was the first laboratory devoted exclusively to psychological research because it focused on senses. You see? So we have to dwell on something, we have to focus on something. So he was acknowledged to be the father of psychology. You see? Because he was the first one who insisted and who instituted the first laboratory psychology in Germany. Okay? Now, there is another person that is actually a very important contributor in psychology. We have Edward Titchener. contributed so much in psychology also. Now take note of this. Wong taught Edward Titchener. Edward Titchener was a student of William Bond, no, who went to the United States. So from Germany to United States. William Bond is from Germany in Europe, while Edward Titchener contributed immensely with the psychological concepts in America because he immigrated there, taking the teachings of William Bond. No? Now, William Bond is very essential in the development of structuralism. That is the first school of thought that we know of right now that give rise to the fundamental science of psychology, structuralism. So it gives rise to certain schools of thought that psychologists would actually follow. Remember this? William Bond established the first laboratory for psychology because he tried to study senses. William Bond has a student named Edward Titchener who proposed a first school of thought in psychology, which he calls as structuralism. Edward Titchener did not stay in Germany, he went to the United States. Therefore, from Germany to United States, the immense growth of psychology originated from there. Because in America, there are so many people who actually followed suit. That we are going to study later on. No? So Edward Titchener developed structuralism. What is very important in structuralism? He actually described the structures that compose the mind, producing sensations, feelings, and thought. Remember, William Bond was focused on how senses are being observed, are being, you see, acquired among individuals in the animal kingdom. Why senses? Because, you know, the phenomena, how do we see? How do we hear? You see? How do we smell? Before you know psychology, before you know anatomy, isn't it that people are asking, why is it that I can smell? Why is it that I can see things around me? You see? Why is it so? All the things that come around me, why is it that I can identify them? Why is it that I can appreciate music? How does it happen? So that was the first thing, the first phenomena that were studied, the phenomena that were studied by William Bond. Okay, so Edward Titchener therefore tried to make a certain school of thought. In that case, trying to narrow the study of William Bond. No, here he actually helped in the formulation of structuralism, right? So in short, according to William Bond, according to Edward Titchener, right, the mind is composed of different structures. There must be a specific part of the brain. You know, the question between mind and the brain, no? Still, the problem is there. So Edward Titchener interchanged the mind and the brain. Therefore, there must be a part of the brain that would detect senses. There must be a part of the brain that would actually control our emotions. There would be a part of the brain that would control our thoughts. You see? So little by little, they try to look into the structures of the brain, compartmentalizing the part of the brain, as if this part of the brain would be associated to specific thoughts or to specific, let's say, phenomena, like the phenomena or the phenomenon of sensation, feelings, and thoughts. That's the reason why sometimes, if we are going to look at this, no, we know this from our teachers in elementary and high school. They're telling if the brains can be divided into two, the left brain will be associated always with logical thinking, and the right brain is always associated with emotion. You see, they are always telling if you are a left brainer, you are thinking; if you are a right brainer, you are more on emotions. These would always be associated with structuralism. And that was the thing that was proposed by Edward Titchener. Edward Titchener was a student of the father of psychology, William Bond. No, Moving forward, right? Titchener presented a stimulus to his subjects. This is how he did his experiments, no? So Titchener presented the stimulus to his subject and asked them to analyze the separate features, right? Now, although there was no feasible way to check accuracy of his subject's observation, his methods were eventually abandoned. But the most important thing that he contributed in psychology is that he was able to make his follower think. There could be something that would detect emotion. There could be something, part of the brain, that would detect thoughts and feelings. All right, moving forward, although it was abandoned eventually because it's not viable, it's not dependable, it's very difficult to defend because the moment that you're going to claim something, you must actually defend it. Yeah, you can easily, it can stand on its own. That's how we actually coming out with new theories as of now. Now, researchers eventually became more interested in describing, you see, in describing and analyzing observable behaviors. We cannot go into the mind of individual. That is actually the problem of Edward. We cannot open the brain of a person who is alive. The moment we are going to do that, we are actually going to kill that person. That's the reason why it's very difficult. We cannot directly observe the brain of a living thing, of a living human being. That's why it makes the theory of Titchener difficult to prove, right? So we abandon his proposal, but new researchers came in. They are not interested with structuralism, but they are actually interested in the study of observable behavior, the things that can be seen. And that is actually giving rise to a new school of thought. After Titchener, post-Titchener, we have the work of William James. We call functionalism. You see? So the timeline, William Bonn, 1879, established in Germany the first laboratory of psychology. William Bonn has a student, Edward Titchener. Edward Titchener proposed a new school of thought, which we call structuralism. There must be a part of the brain that would actually focus on a specific compartment, thoughts, emotions, and feelings. But of course, it was abandoned because it's difficult to prove and it's difficult to study. Now, a lot of researchers would really be focused on observable things, the things that they can easily prove. So they focus on something else. They focus on functions. So William James proposed a new way to analyze behavior by looking into the action of an individual. And he proposed the school of thought to be named as functionalism. So from Edward Titchener, we have William James. William James wrote the Principles of Psychology, the first textbook of psychology in 1890. Now, he was interested in how the mind produces behaviors. You see, mind that cannot be seen produce behavior that can be seen. We cannot directly observe the mind because this cannot be seen, but we can observe the mind through the behavior that can be seen. So this is what leads us to the psychology as of now. No, the mind produces behavior rather than its composition or form. Of course, expected, since he is one of those who rejected the work of structuralism, the work of Titchener. So he rejected definitely Bonn and the work of Titchener. No, and his approach, he called his approach as functionalism. What's all about functionalism? As I mentioned to you earlier, they are more interested on his followers, and he are more interested on studying the actions, the behaviors, as a reflection of what is actually in the mind. Okay, so that is actually what we could actually consider on the work of William James. Now, this is the early era and rules of psychology, the typical questions from a functionalist perspective that will include the following. How does a person recall the answer to a question? As you will know, this is pertaining to cognitive psychologists right now because it's actually branched out. But during the time, there is no cognitive psychology. We only know that a person is thinking, so therefore, how can we memorize in order to answer to the question? How are we selecting answer to a specific question? Because from the beginning, we tend to ask questions. Therefore, how an individual tend to find answers. How do we access the information in the brain? So this is actually what he's after. No? How does a person inhibit an undesirable impulse? Although we will attribute this on the work of Sigmund Freud later, but during this time, he is actually viewing this, no? What will happen if you are trying to restrain yourself from doing something? How are you not going to get angry? How are you controlling your emotions? There must be something that controls your emotion. So this is one of the questions that he asked. Another way is, can a person attend to more than one task at a time? Multiple intelligence in our current concept, multitasking as we know of. Actually, this is very familiar with the students right now, isn't it? Right? When you are studying, how many things are you doing? This is the meaning of multitasking. It originated, this actually gives rise to the work of William James, right? When you study, I'm so sure some of you here are playing music, right? Loud music or with earphone. No? Other people are watching TV also with headphone on, and so many things. Multitasking, no? Or even cooking. You are studying while cooking, while washing, among others. You see, how can a person attend to more than one task at a time? So there must be something, no? The brain is not just capable of doing that. There must be something. So this is actually how William James became interested in. So his functionalism was actually brought down because of these questions. No? All right. So let us try to also look into the work of evolutionary psychology. No? When one of the biologists would actually contribute something to psychology. No? So remember, as I mentioned to you earlier, the work of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin actually contributed immensely in the development of psychology, right? He was the first, he proposed a new theory, because you see, if you're going to look at the work of Charles Darwin is a biologist actually. He was a part of an expedition of a very important British expedition ship. We call that as HMS Beagle, no? So he was actually an onboard biologist, because they would like, the Queen of England would like to let him study so many species. And of course, you know that most of his works would be actually coming from a separate island called Galapagos, no? In Galapagos, he was able to study the tortoise, big turtles, no? So why is it that there are so many tortoises there? So they evolved through time. And he came out with his book called The Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. It was published in 1859 when we are just starting psychology. Remember, the first laboratory of psychology would actually be established in 1879. His work actually came 20 years before, on the origin of a species by means of natural selection. Then 12 years after, 8 years before the establishment of the first laboratory of psychology, in 1871, he was able to come up with The Descent of Man, a new book also. Now here, he had to consider basic features that held in common by animals, such as thinking and emotions, how we survive. That's why he came out with, he actually brought the new concept in psychology called comparative psychology. We use extensively the perspective of Charles Darwin, wherein we always think that the most fit will survive, including right now. If you are very resilient, you will survive, but if you're not, you will not survive, no? Okay? They compare different species, one species after another. So he gave rise, because of his work, they give rise to the foundation of comparative psychology. Moving forward, no? Right? And in comparative psychology, the comparative psychologists always devise experiments to measure animal behavior, animal intelligence, and that of human beings. So we'll always make comparison. We study animals, then we compare that to human beings. We study insects, then we compare that to human beings. We study cats, then we have to compare that to the human beings. Because there could always be similarity among different species from similar kingdom. Like in the kingdom of Animalia, no? In the kingdom of Animalia, we have kingdom Animalia, we have different species, no? All right. Moving forward, some of the experiment conducted by comparative psychologists would always be the delayed response problem. Delay. How are you going to delay your response? We are going to look into that later on. No, the problem of delayed response. Why people actually respond. No, this contributed immensely in the development of the psychology of emotion. No, and then of course the detour problem. See, so people would actually find another way. That's the thing. How do you find another way when you cannot actually go on a direct way? Then there is also a pattern recognition that contributed immensely into cognitive abilities, into psychology of intelligence or cognitive psychology, right? So along that line, no, these are the early works of comparative psychologists, because the first thing that they have studied would be the behavior of animals, then later on compared to human beings, right? Just like what they did on this experiment, they studied the rats. Of course, the rat would actually try to find a way, no? All right. Another one, of course, this one, the detour problem. The first one is actually the delayed response. So if you're going to duplicate this, what are you going to do? If you are going to open the black, the rat may not actually go out first, because the rat will be confused on what to do. That's the meaning of delayed response. There is no automatic response, no? So that's one of the problems. Eventually, the rat will respond. The next one, of course, is the detour problem. The dog actually is trying to find out how can I get the food when there is a black in between. You see? Shall you go detour? See? Or shall you go directly? Questions like that. A simple thing will actually look into the behavior of an individual. What are you going to do in order to reach your food? Are you going to jump over the black, or are you going to run around? You see, simple observation like this will give rise to the new theory of psychology, you know. Moving forward, pattern recognition, like the zebra, it looks like me, you know. An individual person's intelligence would actually look into patterns. Most of the time, when we try to recognize things, when we look to patterns, when you're going to look at numbers, when you're going to look for patterns, so many geniuses are actually identified just because they were able to identify patterns. When we see numbers, we are going to look at we are going to look at patterns. When we see words, we are going to look at patterns. When we try to understand the world, we try to look at patterns. No, that's how we establish the science of intelligence. That's how we establish IQ. In the 1940s, IQ test was actually very, very prevalent, no? Moving forward, right? According to research of comparative psychologists, no? Some species appear to be gifted, yes, in certain tasks and highly deficient in others. Now, if you're going to look, I was actually reading the news today, particularly in the Philippines. There is one part of the Philippines that says a lot of dolphins have been stranded and have been killed. You know, they are stranded, most probably because they would actually have gone to a very shallow water. Now, what is actually very important here? We are trying to compare the intelligence of dolphins and intelligence. They are always assuming that. They're always telling that dolphins could be as intelligent as man. You see? So this is the thing. Some animals would actually be gifted in doing a specific task. Like, for instance, I'm going to give you an example. A snake can actually climb, but not the bird or not the elephant. An elephant can carry an object, a very big object, but not the bird. You see, a turtle can swim, but not the monkey. So along that line, so certain species could actually be more gifted to do other tasks, to do certain tasks than highly, and of course, others are actually highly deficient. How come and why? So we are going to look into the differences. We compare. That gives rise to comparative psychology, right? Another very important person in psychology is Francis Galton. He is not a psychologist, no? But Francis Galton investigated how heredity influenced variation in cognitive ability. So why is it that individuals are different? That's why we were able to identify the different levels of intelligence. Why is it people are genius, intelligent, above average? There are also people who are stupid and who are also morons. No, these are different classification of intelligence that we know of today. So this was the basic question that actually Francis Galton asked when he was trying to find out the variations of the cognitive abilities of every single individual from a different species or from a similar species. He found that sons of famous and talented men, accordingly, during that time, were more likely to be accomplished, and explain this as due to the influence of heredity. Is it? So giving rise to the question of nature versus nurture phenomenon. Remember that when I tried to present this to you at the beginning of our class, at the beginning of our lecture? No? He tried to develop an intelligence test, but of course, he failed. Because you cannot just easily develop it. You cannot just actually, easily come invent something. No? Things will actually be discovered in due time. But actually, it gives rise to the study of intelligence. No? His work gives rise to the study of present-day cognitive psychology. No? So this is actually the thing. He was actually looking into, hey, children of most successful people tend to actually have children who are more successful. No? So that was the concept that he was able to formulate from the beginning. No? And then here comes Alfred Binet. Now, Alfred Binet is actually attributed mostly on cognitive intelligence. No? Working for the French government during the time, and he devised the first useful intelligence test in 1905. That is during World War I. No? To identify children in the public school system who might be in need of special services. Always take note, Alfred Binet was first. You see, he actually was the one who developed first intelligence tests. What is actually the purpose of intelligence tests? To identify students or children in the public school system who are actually in need of special services, gifted, or those people who are actually lagging behind. No? This test was important in the United States eventually, and become the template for IQ tests and other psychological tests. No? IQ test is actually a very simple concept. I'm going to teach you about this, but to pass through IQ test, it's just like, IQ test is the measure of our actual intelligence to the current or chronological intelligence that we may actually have. I'll give you a certain example. No? Maybe your age right now is 20. Majority of you are 20 years old, right? That is your chronological age. Now, look at this formula, huh? In order to compute an IQ test, right now, this is the formula that we are using in psychology. You need to come out with your mental age divided by chronological age times 100. No? Always take note that the average mental IQ is actually 100. That's equivalent to 1. No? If you have an average of 100, then therefore your IQ is 100, is normal. Yeah? Anything that goes below or that goes above, then you are actually deviating. Anything that goes below, we call that as below normal. No? In below normal, we have classification called stupid and morons. Above normal, we have above average, and we have superior, then we have the genius. No, the work of Alfred Binet gives rise to IQ tests. It became a template in the United States. No, that is actually very important. No, all right. Now, while structuralism was eventually abandoned, so the first school of thought was actually structuralism. That is actually started by Edward Titchener, based on the work of William Bond. Then William James actually followed suit by trying to propose functionalism. Then here comes another very important person, okay, who actually developed behaviorism. It's Watson, okay? Now, structuralism was eventually abandoned because that could be indefensible. We cannot actually study human mind directly. So behaviorism was established. This is the field of psychology that concentrates on the measurable behaviors, actions, and not the mental process, because it's difficult to study the mental process. No? Now, behaviorists seek to study observable behaviors, usually associated with learning. That's the first step. No, we are going to look into learning first. What do you do? What do you learn? So that can easily be measured. But of course, we branch out eventually to something that's observable, just like the mannerisms that you are reading right now. That is the area of behaviorism. No, so this is the third school of thought. Behaviorism was founded by John D. Watson in 1913. Behaviorism came after functionalism. When behaviorism was proposed, totally structuralism was abandoned, but there are still followers of William James who stick to his theory of functionalism. Now, this is revolutionary anyway, according to John Watson, the proposed advocate of behaviorism. No, accordingly, psychology, as the behaviorist views, it is purely objective. This time, he mentioned the word objective, experimental, experiment. That's before it becomes a science. This is really the real foundation of psychology, no, of natural science. Its theoretical goal is the prediction and control of behavior. Until now, psychology is defined that way, isn't it? So we get the definition from the concept of the so-called behaviorism. Until now, there are so many behaviorists, no? So theoretical goal is actually the predict. We are observing behavior because we would like to understand, number one. Number two, to predict. And number three, to control behavior. That is exactly the definition of psychology that we have. And that definition came from behaviorists, came from John B. Watson in 1913. Okay? Any questions so far, class? Do you understand? Do you follow?
Yes, doctor.
Or it's too much already?
Maybe a little bit.
Well, I hope that you read chapter 1, okay? Introduction, no, so that you will actually know whatever I'm talking about here. I'll try to finish all the 55 then, so that next meeting I will be starting with human development. Okay, so moving forward. All right, now straightforward questions.
Doctor,
Yes.
I think our class is done. The time.
Is it 3:37? We're going to be until 4 o'clock, right? You do not have any car services whatsoever. You are staying at home only, isn't it? I think shall we finish the whole thing so that we can start with the new topic next meeting, okay? Anyway, I'll try not to dwell so much because I need you to take a rest also, right? Will that be possible? Are you good with that? Yeah?
Yeah, doctor, take your time.
Okay, well, continue, no? Now, we are still on the early era of psychology, no? The straightforward questions posed by early behaviorists, this is the third school of thought. Remember this. The first school of thought is that by the student of William Bond, structuralism. Second, functionalism, William James. Third, John Watson, the so-called behaviorism. Okay? And this is the most prevalent school of thought that's being utilized by most of the psychologists as of now, because it actually guarantees that we can study the mind by observing the behavior of an individual. The straightforward questions posed by early behaviorists would actually be associated with the aspects of observable behavior. But comparing to modern behaviorists, we no longer hope to discover simple universal pattern of behavior, because before we tend to simplify everything. We tend to look into patterns. As we look into the simplicity of things, as we look into pattern of things, little by little that we discover the complexity from simplicity. This is actually the problem that we have. We try to simplify things, that as we try to simplify them, we try to actually discover complex pattern. So this is actually how modern behaviorists view the phenomenon right now. There is, you see, the modern behaviorists no longer try to discover the simple universal patterns of behavior, because right now we accept that our behaviors would always be unique and would always be different from one another. Okay? Now, the principles of behaviorism are still useful to modern psychologists as of this time, but we are not still sticking to looking to the universal pattern. Instead, we try to understand every single behavior that we actually discover. Either it could be, we will not find. This is actually a problem of actually modern science as of now. Psychology is different, In physics, they are trying to unify different theories. That's the reason why Stephen Hawking became famous. UK, if you know that, Stephen Hawking became famous just because of his very controversial theory about black hole. Black hole is not black at all; it's white. And he was able to come out with a new discovery. The event horizon, there is what we call as Hawking radiation. And unfortunately, he was not given a Nobel Prize because of this. But Albert Einstein was given, because of the discovery of the fluctuation of light. Anyway, that's something else. We try to unify things in psychology. Instead of unifying our understanding of human behavior, simple pattern of behavior. Now, the main focus right now, particularly of modern psychologists, would be to understand a specific behavior. Not to look into pattern, but as much as possible, we try to specify and understand different types of behavior. That's actually the modern agenda, the main agenda of modern behaviorists, those who believe on the work of John B. Watson, right? Now, the next school of thought that is actually very important, of course, is the rebel of Dim Hall, and I like him, Sigmund Freud. He was able to come out with the fourth school of thought, the psychoanalytic theory, the psychoanalytic school of thought. Remember this, there are four. These are all the major schools of thought that we are using in the field of psychology. Structuralism, no more psychologists would actually believe in that, but still we try to study them because they actually give foundation on psychology. We have number 2, structuralism, number 3, functionalism, number 4, psychoanalytic. Sigmund Freud proposed the existence of unconscious mind. Now, again, unconscious mind, we are still going back to number 1. We're going back to structuralism, where we try to study things that are not seen. How do we study unconscious mind? That could be rooted in our animal origins. Then he was able to come up with something in difference to structuralism. How do we study unconscious mind? We are going to look into the patterns of our conscious behavior. That's the reason why he was able to come out with the structures of the human mind, the structures of personality that we know of as of now. The id, ego, and the superego. All these three are not seen or cannot be seen. Except that the twist is that the ego is actually the byproduct or the ego operates on the reality, the one that is here and now, the one that we can actually see. Anyway, we'll actually look into that as we try to study the work of Sigmund Freud, particularly in our next topic, human development. We're going to study also Sigmund Freud extensively on the theories of personality. This is just only an introduction. This is actually how essential his work is. No, he proposed unconscious mind, the one that is similar to structuralism, but of course there is a twist. He tried to incorporate the unconscious mind with some sort of conscious along that line. So he was able to identify conscious, unconscious, subconscious. Then he was able to come out with the structures of personality, the id, ego, and superego. Now, much of the psychoanalytic theory has been rejected, of course, as of now, as unscientific. Now, a lot of people actually question him. But he stood, no? Imagine Sigmund Freud is trying to interpret dreams. In fact, he was able to come out with a book about the interpretation of dreams. He was very controversial during his time. That's why so many people does not believe on him. Many people love him, and many people hated him also. Like in the United States, no? Donald Trump, more than 70 million voted for him. Many people love him, but many people, as many as those who voted for him, hate him. That's how I can describe Sigmund Freud. Many people love him, and at the same time, many people hate him. That's the reason why a lot of people do not want to hear the work of Sigmund Freud. But for me, I really love his work because it explains something. No? So a lot of people claim that his work is always unscientific. No? But his idea is actually very important, particularly in the explanation of anxiety, in the explanation of psychological distress, in the explanation of abnormal behavior and abnormal personalities. So we are going to look into that as we go on, right? Okay, any questions? So we come to know that there are 4 schools of thought, and the last one is psychoanalytic, right? Now going forward, how are we actually looking into academic trend and applied psychology? Now we came out with psychology in academic. So as of now, American Psychological Association, where I belong to, classified very specific field of psychology. There are, no? There is specific actually as a part of psychology that caters the need of teachers in psychology. Don't you know that? Academic psychology, as we know, is belonging to the Society of Teaching Psychology, or the SDP. You know, because majority of the psychologists are working in academic institution. Why? They're working in academic institution because most of the psychology laboratories are attached to universities. There are so many universities that capitalize on this. No, we have the Princeton University. So many things. Not so many universities in the United States capitalize on this. Okay. And there is also they're making trends, no? They're making trends in the areas of psychology. Okay, all right. University of Pennsylvania is actually making a lot of headlines this time because of positive psychology. Okay, Princeton also during the time. No, all right. Moving forward, there is a thriving research including the scientific study of consciousness. No, so until now, a lot of people do not want to involve themselves in things that cannot be studied, the things that cannot be tangible. But of course, there are psychologists who are more brave, so they are looking into the study of consciousness. No, a lot of psychologists would want to study applied psychology because they can actually see the result immediately, particularly in industry. Now, in applied psychology, we have the so-called health psychology. These are all areas of applied psychology. What is actually the meaning of health psychology? This is the branch of psychology that would always explain our health behaviors. How do we eat? Why we smoke? How do we stop smoking? And so on. No, because these days smoking associated diseases is prevalent. No, food associated diseases is prevalent. Among others, we have the cardiovascular diseases. How do we actually look into that. These are the areas about psychology. Forensic psychology also, you see, this will involve in the issues of mental competence for trial, accuracy of eyewitness, criminal justice system, among others. No, also profiling of people. This is extensively used by so many investigative agencies all over the world, like in the case of United States. A lot of forensic psychologists are working in the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI for India. No, here in United Arab Emirates, I do not know. No, but there are certainly psychologists who are trained in psychology, in forensic psychology, in the CID, Criminal Investigation Division or Department, no, and so on. Of course, another very important aspect of psychology is the psychology for women. Now, very sad because women were excluded before in the areas of psychology. In fact, there were so many problems, no? A lot of people were not allowed to practice psychology just because of that, no? It was because of one psychologist, Mary Calkins, actually attributed to the establishment of women's psychology, psychology of gender psychology, of course, Mary Calkins had a very, very difficult experience. No, Mary Calkins was the first woman who actually was supposed to be awarded PhD in psychology, but unfortunately, Harvard University did not give her. Why? Simply because she was a woman. Okay, she became, although she did not have a PhD degree, she became a well-respected psychologist because she was elected as a one-time member of American Psychological Association. When I attended the 2017 conference in Washington, D.C., I think I witnessed a very important event in psychology where Mary Calkins was posthumously awarded his PhD in psychology. No, because she was not awarded definitely just because she was a woman, and that's very difficult. So as of now, women activism is very prevalent, especially in United States. There is another area of psychology that's associated to it eventually. No, so this is Mary Calkins. No, all right, and of course, as I mentioned about cross-cultural psychology, this is a trend that we have because you see, traveling around the world may actually be very prevalent. This is more than a new normal. It's very easy to go to the United States. It's very easy to go to Phuket. It's very easy to go to Kuala Lumpur. It's very easy to go somewhere else because it's just a matter of airplane ride. And every single person can actually be mingling with other culture. Just as I said, when you go to Mannar Mall in RAC, no, you can easily mingle with another nationality, another culture. Even Arab people are different from one another. Palestinians may be different from Emirati. Emirati may be different from Egyptian, right? The cultures are totally different. That's why cross-cultural psychology is a new emerging psychological science that's actually focusing on human diversity. No, this is actually very important. All right. So definitely, psychology is just an evolving science. We are actually trying to find every single experience to be associated with a specific part of psychology. As of now, there is a new evolving science. No, we try to understand the reaction of people on COVID-19. It's more on psychology, the psychology of COVID-19. The first thing that we actually understood is that when COVID-19 arrived, everybody was afraid. So psychology of emotion, psychology of COVID-19, psychology of pandemic. As of now, the buzzword that we know of is COVID-19, pandemic, and so on and so forth. It gives rise to new scientific inquiry. It gives rise to a new psychological concept, a new branch of psychology. Eventually, it will be there. No? Because we are trying to find answers about everything. That's actually what we know because psychology is ever an evolving science. All right? So any questions so far hopefully we'll try to find a way to develop a new psychology of in fact, if you're going to look at the mentality of Arab people, psychology of Arab people, psychology of European people, psychology of Filipino people, you see. So if we are going to focus our studies on a specific group of people, we can actually come up with new science and with new brands of psychology. That's actually how important psychology is. Always take note that psychology tends not to look into universal pattern. Instead, psychology will look into an individual pattern of behavior, and at the same time, of course, we try to look at new things because we are trying to evolve. Our profession is evolving. All right? Any questions so far? That ends our chapter 1. The next topic, I do hope that you are going to study your human development. Okay? Can we close? Is there any question? Any question? No question?
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, doctor. Thank you.
Yes, for your attendance, please write in the message board your last 2 digits of ID number, and then you're good to go. Thank you so much. I think it's
Have a nice day,
next.
doctor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, by next week there will be a new schedule. Try to wait for the announcement coming from Miss Karen. Okay, it will start at 1:30, I guess. All right. Thank you so much, and have a good day.